The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I deliberately didn't talk about this yesterday because I wanted to just allow a little more time for information to come out. And we now have a lot more details about this completely out of control MAGA clown who pushed his way into the camera area at Donald Trump's El Paso, Texas Build the Wall rally on Monday night, which we covered yesterday, and attacked a cameraman from the BBC, had to be restrained. Obviously, the guy was wearing the requisite red MAGA hat, shoving reporters, knocking over cameras and tripods, yelling F the media. And this all happened during the speech right after the point where Donald Trump attacked the media again, something that he's been doing for years at this point. So I've got a few different clips and audio that I'm going to show you. Here, to begin with, is video of the camera that was actually hit, going from just showing Donald Trump to a jumble of video as this MAGA hat-wearing clown slams into it. It was happening during a key moment of Trump's speech during which he was listing races and ethnicities, which is a fun part of any MAGA rally.
Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans have reached the lowest level in the history of our country.
Oh, man, what an atmosphere at these rallies. Here's video of the guy being escorted out to cheers of Trump, Trump, Trump. So absolute and total chaos, reporters yelling for police, no police were nearby. Here's more video from Jorge Salgado, who was there as well. These rallies are more reminiscent of wrestling events than they are of places where political issues are discussed. And then lastly, here's another video with the guy's last moment of glory, tipping his hat to the crowd and yelling, "Make America Great Again," as he is escorted out.
We need security, please.
Yeah, so this is about many things. This is about hostility towards media fomented by Donald Trump in a way we've not seen any recent American president do. This is about violence, physical violence by the right. This is about a sort of general atmosphere of aggression at Trump events. I sort of, not really even jokingly, 10% jokingly said the atmosphere here is like a WWE event. It's basically true, right? I mean, there's this constant undertone of aggression that takes place at these events. And it's yet another one of these lie-riddled Trump rallies where everything that comes out of Trump's mouth is accepted completely uncritically. But I think the really important focus after this incident, Pat, should be that the reporters have to have these incidents prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. BBC and the reporter should file suit. There's endless video evidence here. And, you know, on the one hand, you've got Trump fomenting aggression towards media. On the other hand, you have people who are feeling license to go further than the law allows in actions against members of the media. And the one, we can't control Trump's rhetoric, but what we can control is that every time something like this happens, we have to use the law to the fullest extent possible to make sure that there are consequences for being aggressive towards members of the media.
I totally agree with that. And also, I view this as like a perfect metaphor because it's not like the guy attacked an opinion reporter. He attacked a cameraman. And the job of a cameraman is to present things as they happen, right? Just to film the events that take place in front of you. And for whatever reason, he was just finding that to be too obscene, that can't get out to the public. It goes into this alternative facts thing, I think, that they've been supporting for a while now.
Yeah, and I think the bigger picture is sort of what you're getting to, which is that we have now a complete and total disconnect from the realities of what, quote, media is even doing as some kind of amorphous umbrella term, and what the values are that we claim to support. And as you point out, a camera person is there to keep the camera trained on what's taking place and to pass it through to people so that they can consume it. Absolutely horrible incident, and we'll see if there ultimately are any consequences for the perpetrator here. We're now learning the full scope of the absurdity of this rally we've been discussing, Donald Trump's El Paso, Texas Build the Wall rally on Monday night. I've already told you some examples of why this is just so wacky and lie-riddled and problematic. Number one is that Donald Trump has previously said that El Paso is a very dangerous city, a border city, when the truth, of course, is that El Paso is one of the safest cities of its size in the United States. It was safe before a little bit of border fencing was put up, and it remained safe after that bit of border fencing was put up. But Donald Trump choosing to say it's an incredibly dangerous place, and it proves why we need the wall. We already talked today about this assault on a BBC cameraman just moments after Donald Trump again slammed the media during the speech. We also have discussed the kind of hilarity, maybe contrast is a better way to say it, of Donald Trump talking about, yes, the wall is definitely getting built on Monday night at this rally, as Republicans were in the process of agreeing with Democrats in principle to a deal that has no substantive border wall funding, but a sort of billion-dollar handout for some bollards on a measly 55 miles of the border. So now we get to just a kind of more cartoonish, hilarious Trump lie. It's kind of like the sequel to the entire inauguration crowd fiasco from Donald Trump's 2017 inauguration. During the rally in El Paso, Texas, 2 nights ago, Donald Trump bizarrely claimed that exceptions had been made by the El Paso Fire Department to allow even more people into the building than the number that would normally be allowed, presumably by the fire code. This is so specific and so pointless and so untrue, but for some weird reason, Trump chose to concoct this lie. Let's take a look at that moment from the speech.
There's never been. If you would say, as an example, that tonight 69,000 people signed up to be here. Now, the arena holds 8,000, and thank you, Fire Department. They got in about 10. Thank you, Fire Department. Appreciate it.
Oh, man. So anyway, that's just not true. The El Paso Fire Department has now commented on this, because if there's an allegation made that the fire department allowed 25% more people than should safely be allowed into the building, that's a real problem, right? And the El Paso Fire Department has said, no, we didn't do anything to allow more people into the arena than it's meant to hold, or more people than the facility is permitted to allow. But here's where it gets even wackier. The El Paso Fire Department was there, and they said the capacity of the arena is 6,500, not 8,000, as Donald Trump claimed. The actual attendance of the event was also 6,500, not 10,000, as Donald Trump said. Why does Donald Trump keep lying about crowd sizes? And a big part of this entire thing, this fixation on crowd size, seems to be that Trump wanted his thing to be bigger than Beto O'Rourke's. He doesn't like the idea of Beto O'Rourke having a bigger thing than Trump has. So when it became clear that Beto O'Rourke's rally, to even call it that is maybe not even the right term, but the rally in which Beto O'Rourke participated had between 10 and 15,000 people, Trump all of a sudden felt like the size of his thing was being put to shame with only 6,500. So he just makes up that 8,000 is the number of people that would normally be allowed and 10,000 is what we had. But who cares, right? This is the distraction. I want to talk about Donald Trump's obvious and brazen lies, but at the same time, a bigger crowd doesn't prove who has better ideas or the right ideas or the smarter followers. This is a debate that only a very petty man who just lies is even interested in having. And I think that that's the most disturbing thing of all. Let me know what you think is behind Donald Trump lying about the size of his thing. I'm on Twitter at @DPacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let me take a moment here before we start digging into Hatriot Mail and much more to thank Linda Fisher, who's today's new member of the day. Our program is mostly funded by people like you, people just like you, in more ways than you know, including that they want to support independent media like The David Pakman Show. You can join Linda Fisher at www.joinpakman.com. You can also use the coupon code THISIS2020 to save 40% off of the cost of your membership. And I want to thank Kelly Marr, who is today's longtime sustaining member of the day, with us nearly 5 years. Thanks to Linda. Thanks to Kelly. Look forward to welcoming you as a new member of the day someday soon. Okay, it's time for this week's edition of Hatriot Mail. Hatriot Mail is when a professional voiceover artist does interpretive readings of Hatriot Mail that I get. Quick reminder.
Teachers can buy their own school supplies, but we'll throw in the Glock for free. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
Okay, so this week's Hatriot Mail, yes, it contains anti-Semitism. That's not rare, but it also includes, I didn't even realize that this took off until I received a number of emails about it. When Fox News accidentally put up an image that implied Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had passed away, it said her birth year to 2019, and they put it up for like a second and then apologized. A bunch of people who email me believe that it's actually true that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed away and that there's a conspiracy to hide that so that Donald Trump doesn't get to select a new Supreme Court justice. Anyway, this week's Hatriot Mail combines the anti-Semitism we have come to be accustomed to in Hatriot Mail with this RBG conspiracy.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, evil old Zionist Jew sodomite witch, is dead. Fox News made a mistake. Can David Pakman, beta Zionist Jew sodomite, prove Ruth Bader Ginsburg is still alive? These sick, heartless, ruthless Zionist Jews want to continue with their lies of RBG being alive so that President Trump's can't pick another constitutional judge of his choice. They want to drag this shenanigan monkey business as long as they can. Where is Harvey Levin TMZ, Jonah Peretti BuzzFeed? Only air bad fake news about our President Trump, First Lady Melania, and other good traditional goy. Checkmart.
Yeah, I don't know that I can really add too much to this other than to say that this, if we imagine a time capsule that would be sent to generations elsewhere in the universe, if indeed intelligent life exists, this is what we need to bury at all costs, because its inclusion in any kind of communication with other intelligent species can only spell doom for the future of Homo sapiens on the planet Earth. Use the coupon code Hatriot40 to send a middle finger salute to the Hatriots and to save 40% when you sign up for a membership at www.joinpakman.com. The coupon code is HATRIOT40. Okay, we should talk a little bit about the health of the President of the United States of America. There have been question marks around Donald Trump's physical health for a long time, and this isn't Hillary has Parkinson's sort of conspiracy stuff. This is really a very sort of sober and concerning issue. If you think back to the first strange statement that we got from a medical professional about Donald Trump's health, it was that letter from his doctor, Bornstein, during the campaign, which said that Donald Trump was not only in great health, he would be the healthiest of any president in the history of the United States, which is a really strange thing for a medical professional to say, particularly when they've not examined former presidents of the United States. So that was weird to begin with. As a general sort of reality, it's very clear that Donald Trump is obviously not as healthy as President Barack Obama. We only have to go back one president. And there's really no way in which an obese 72-year-old who eats tons of fast food and never exercises could be healthier than the 40-something person that Barack Obama was when he became president of the United States as an active and in shape person. So it didn't make sense from the get-go. And we eventually found out that Dr. Bornstein actually wrote that letter under pressure from Donald Trump. Donald Trump, according to some sources, actually dictating the letter and Bornstein ultimately acquiescing and signing off on it. So that was sort of episode one in the Trump health situation. We later heard from Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who gave Trump a physical and mental exam, a cognitive test, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. And he came out of it saying Trump is just in great shape. He weighs 239 pounds and is 6'3" tall. Obviously untrue. Every picture of Donald Trump next to people who we know are 6'3" or even 6'1" shows that Trump is shorter. We have pictures of Donald Trump standing next to Barack Obama, for example, who is known to be 6'1", and Trump looks maybe the same height or maybe even shorter than Barack Obama. So we know Trump's not 6'3", and 239 in terms of a weight just happened to be the limit before obesity for someone who is actually 6'3". So it didn't make any sense. It wasn't at all believable what Dr. Ronnie Jackson said. And then Dr. Ronnie Jackson was nominated to be Secretary of Veterans Affairs, a nomination that ultimately imploded and ended up with Dr. Ronnie Jackson withdrawing from that. So it all stinks. That gets us up to yesterday. We now have a comment from former Vice President Dick Cheney's cardiologist, Jonathan Reiner, who says that he believes the White House is hiding something about Donald Trump's latest physical exam, tweeting yesterday, quote, "It's been 4 days since the president underwent his annual physical exam, and still no data has been released. What are they hiding?" And indeed, it has been 4 days. And instead of actual information about Donald Trump's physical exam, we have this very strange, vague memo. The new presidential doctor, Sean Conley, put out a memo that's just ridiculous at its face. We have it up on the screen. Sean Conley wrote, "This afternoon at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, the president participated in a second periodic physical examination. Over the course of approximately 4 hours, I performed and supervised the evaluation with a panel of 11 different board-certified specialists. He did not undergo any procedures requiring sedation or anesthesia. The president is very grateful, as if this matters, for the outstanding care he received today. And he especially wants to thank all the doctors, nurses, enlisted and civilian staff who participated." Of course, none of this says anything about Trump's health. And then it ends with, "While the reports and recommendations are being finalized, I'm happy to announce the President of the United States is in very good health, and I anticipate he will remain so for the duration of his presidency and beyond." How can any doctor predict in such a casual way that a person who is approaching their mid-70s and obese, doesn't exercise, and has a terrible diet, how can you predict that they're going to remain in good health for the rest of their presidency and beyond? It's a very strange assertion for a medical professional to make. It's becoming more, Pat, like the North Korean propaganda of the dear leader doesn't defecate and golfed all holes in one the first time he played golf. It's starting to be that type of sort of hagiographic propaganda.
Yeah, and for me, I don't think the president has to be in impeccable shape, although that is a bonus. No. I think if everything gets too bad, then, someone can always replace him or her, right? But the lying is what's concerning, and not just the fact that Trump's lying, but that he has a network of physicians who are willing to go along with it.
Let me give you a counterexample, just so you can see what other medical reports look like for presidents. Here's Barack Obama's report from 2016, and you will notice that there are very specific vital statistics about his age, height, and weight, his BMI, his pulse oximetry, physical examination by systems, outlines eyes, neck, all sorts of specifics. And the second page of this assessment actually has specific laboratory results, his lipid panel, including cholesterol numbers, his fasting blood glucose. This is a serious report about a president's weight. What medications are they on? What vitamins are they taking? This isn't crazy stuff. And we don't even know what Trump's weight is being asserted to be, even though we know the last time we were told it was 239, it was an obvious lie. I wonder, is Donald Trump on medications at this point? We don't even know the answer to that. So the point is, doctors are now noticing this, even from the way that Donald Trump just speaks incoherently at public events. It should convey to any reasonable person that he's not in the best of health. And from what I recall, Pat, tell me if I'm wrong, we still haven't gotten an explanation about the weird God bless the United States of America incident, have we? Because it was at one point asserted that maybe dentures were related, but then we were told the president doesn't even wear dentures.
What did they say it was? Dry mouth? Something like that? When I get dry mouth, I don't start slurring my words like that. I think it was dentures for sure.
Well, yeah, again, there's a denial that the guy even wears dentures. So I don't know that we've gotten a clear answer about that. So medical professionals are noticing, and this is a totally separate issue from Trump's positions on issues and his ability to negotiate deals or what I think of his tax plan. To some degree, the public does have a right to know the truth about the president's health. It's not crazy to consider the individual's health in making an evaluation about whether to vote for them initially or to vote for them for re-election. And what it does relate to is the pattern of lying and deception and just putting out information that most reasonable people recognize as having holes in it, or potentially even of being downright deceptively, deliberately deceptive. And we're not getting those answers here. And we're just getting strange comments after strange comments from every single medical professional who's allowed around Donald Trump. And this, I don't even have time to get into this today, but the Montreal Cognitive Assessment that Trump was given by Dr. Ronnie Jackson meant to be proof that Donald Trump cognitively is fine. We've learned so much about why the specifics of those results also don't really tell us what we need to know about Trump. Will we ever know the truth? I don't know, but maybe someday. I am taking questions today, your questions, on the David Pakman Show Instagram page. If you find David Pakman Show on Instagram and go to today's stories feed, you will see that there is a place you can type in questions for me, and I'll be answering them throughout the afternoon and evening for the rest of the day. And while you're there, follow me on Instagram as well at david.pakman. Quick break, then Bill Scher will join me. I've not been playing electability games with the 2020 Democratic primary. He believes that playing electability games at this early stage is already very, very important. We'll hear from him next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to welcome back to the program today Bill Scher, who is contributing editor to Politico Magazine, also host of the New Books in Politics podcast, part of the New Books Network. And we're going to play electability games today, Bill, which is exactly what I've been telling my audience I'm not going to do. I mentioned this before we started, but as my audience will know, I've been sort of evaluating Democratic contenders for 2020 right now strictly on issues. And one of the reasons that my audience likes this, the people that do, not all of them, is that they believe playing electability games in 2016 led to Donald Trump being president. Now, you introduce in your latest article in Politico, which we're linking to, the idea that the problem isn't playing electability games, that electability should be considered, but that you've got to make the calculation correctly. Is that more or less the position you're taking?
More or less. I mean, there's no perfectly objective standard here. I mean, I think what constitutes electability is going to be fluid from election to election. And, there's also the factor of what the other party does. What's the matchup? So you might have someone who has some electability strengths, but the other person has more, or maybe both candidates have their electability problems. And case in point, 2016. And so one person is seen as worse than the other. And so things that you would say in a vacuum, like being an outright bigot, might be an electability issue in a lot of races, wasn't a problem in 2016. But I do think you want to try to maximize your electability to maximize your chances of succeeding. So if you say, electability has taken us down some bad paths in the past, so forget it completely. Let's just strictly vote your hopes and dreams and let the chips fall. Well, I think there's going to be some risks going down that track too.
So in 2016, was there a miscalculation made about Hillary Clinton's electability?
Well, often electability has been talked about as strictly on some sort of ideological spectrum. So Bernie's too far to the left, Hillary's more in the middle, she's more electable. Or you go back to 2004, Dean, he's too anti-war. They just captured Saddam Hussein in December 2003. Being anti-war is going to be a problem come election day. John Kerry is a military hero. He's more electable. I mean, those are very simplistic electability calculations that in many ways certainly didn't really hit the mark come November. So I would not look at it. I'm not arguing that if you are on the left, therefore you can't win. I think that's too pat. So I broke it down in my Politico piece into 3 electability tests. One is not only tell me what your strategy is of winning, but prove to me you can execute it. I'll go deep into these after I lay them out. And number 2 is not just what positions do you take, but show me how well you defend them. It's easy to say I'm for X, Y, and Z, but when rubber hits the road and the criticisms come, how do you defend your position? And number 3, there's always something. There's always some kind of scandal, kerfuffle, gaffe. And often people will say, well, these are ticky-tack things. You're being unfair. You should let the media decide what's serious and what's not. Well, fairness doesn't count come election day. Show me you know how to deal with it. Prove to me that when you're in the crucible, you can get out. I think those are the 3 main things I would suggest people look for.
Okay, so let's pick some of those, or at least I'll provide some questions as to whether these following items fall under one of those 3 categories. The discussion around who can deal with Trump's nicknames and insults and those sort of bombastic attacks best. Is that important to be thinking about now? And who can do that in your mind?
Yeah, I didn't specify that in this article. I think I mentioned that in a past article, but I think it's absolutely important. And you could argue that's sort of part of what's your strategy or part of how you deal with scandals or quasi-scandals, because it's all about if he's hitting you on a weakness of some sort, how do you deal with it? And Trump is his own unique X factor. We often, Democrats in the past have always had, I think, in their calculation, how do you deal with the Republican attack machine? How do you deal with Karl Rove? How do you deal with Lee Atwater? Those kinds of things. Obviously, Trump is his own issue because it's the candidate himself that is the bully. And what we saw in 2016 is as lowbrow as he goes, he tends to throw you off of your game. He threw off Jeb Bush. He threw off Marco Rubio. He threw off Hillary Clinton. You don't get to play your own game because he ends up dictating the terms of engagement. So it's absolutely important for a Democrat to say, what are you going to do about that? Are you going to engage him better? Are you going to fight him harder or fight him smarter? Or are you going to ignore him and say, that's the deal with bullies, you just don't give him the oxygen? I'm going to stay focused on my message. And since he has already shown he wants to meddle in the primary now, presumably every candidate who gets into the top tier or the front runner slot is going to attract Trump attacks in the primary. So that's both opportunity and peril. You get to show in real time how you're going to deal with it. And if you don't do it well, that might hurt you.
So you and I have spoken before about which issues are so-called voting issues and which issues don't really seem to influence, one, turnout, and two, how people vote. And we've talked about social issues. We've talked about guns, economic policy, you know, very, very long list here. Is there any particular issue or topic right now that you believe is being discussed but is not ultimately going to impact electability? So just like some examples, the Elizabeth Warren DNA thing, Kamala Harris and her record as Attorney General in California, et cetera. Is there anything right now you're seeing that's getting a lot of talk but won't matter?
Well, I can't say today that's not going to matter. I might have thought in March 2015 that Hillary's emails were not going to matter because it just seemed like one of the same old ticky-tack things. But lo and behold, we were talking about it in November 2016. It depends. Whereas you might have thought you were definitely going to talk about Jeremiah Wright by November 2008, but Obama handled it so well at the moment that even if there was some lingering chatter on the far right, it never became the issue come election day for him. So that's her part of the challenge. So Elizabeth Warren, she has not had a great, going back to, I say October, so that is, 4 months, dealing with the Native American issue.
No.
Every time she brings it up and makes some sort of, it follows some sort of apology and never seems to totally go away. Now, maybe the last one will be the last one and it's not going to come up again, but Trump loves talking about Pocahontas. And so it's hard to imagine if she was nominated, that would completely go away. And I think she has yet to show that she knows how to completely eradicate it from the discussion. I don't want to say that means she can't win, there she should be the nominee, but I do think it is a challenge for her.
How about any of these other sort of more general talking points that we hear? Like, for example, a popular one on the left and Democrats about electability is it shouldn't be someone from the Northeast. You need somebody who is going to better appeal to the Rust Belt and the Midwest and the Southeast, and that's simply not going to be someone from the Northeast of the United States. Is that at this point so tired that it shouldn't even be discussed, or is that relevant?
Oh, I think it's very relevant. I would put that in my first test. Show what is your strategy and how are you going to execute it? We have two roughly competing theories of the case amongst Democrats. One is that Democrats win where they can galvanize the base, juice the youth vote, juice the people of color vote, and that way you win the turnout battle. And the other argument is that you have to go after the swing, and that's a lot of white working class, or maybe it's somewhat Midwestern or Southwest suburbanites that are a bit right-leaning but don't love Trump. And so if you're not competing in the Midwest and some of these other swinging areas, and if you have a candidate that's not from there, doesn't know how to appeal to those regions, you're going to be in trouble. So I'm not going to tell you right now, I know which of those cases is correct, but I think the candidate, the burden is on them to say, what is your theory of the case? And show me how you're going to meet your own standard. So take Amy Klobuchar, for example, or Sherrod Brown. Part of their argument is going to be, we're from the Midwest. We have to win here. Pick us. Well, that's fine, but show me what you're going to do now to win those areas. Al Gore's from Tennessee, but he became a different politician once he was competing on the national stage. He wasn't running like he ran as senator in Tennessee, so his past record wasn't relevant. Mitt Romney ran a different race for governor of Massachusetts than he ran for president, so he didn't win Massachusetts. Tell me, how is it that you won in those areas? Maybe the way you won is not what Democratic primary voters necessarily want to hear, but show me that you mean it, you can explain it, and how you're going to execute it, because your past record is not sufficient. And the same for the other argument. If you believe that juicing the base is the way to win, well, Juice it now. Show me how you're going to juice it. Show me who's showing up to your rallies. Show me who you're organizing. Show me that you have unlikely independent voters who have not voted in the past, who are going up on stage to you and saying, yes, I will be here for you if it is this candidate. When Bernie ran in 2016, Hillary had electability issues. I'm not disputing that. But when the voting started and the turnouts in the primary were not as strong as 2008. And Bernie was doing better in the low turnout caucuses than he was in the primaries, be they open or closed. That began to, in my opinion, undercut the message that he had some sort of special electability sauce that was going to carry the day. So I think people need to see the evidence, not just the assertion of what their strategy is.
Okay, so for people who have heard us now talk about all of these different considerations for the last 12 minutes, and they say, hey, you know what, guys? Half the country doesn't vote. Any of these candidates can win if they understand if the public understands the importance of getting Donald Trump out of office. You can win merely on turnout. You shouldn't be talking in this level of detail about electability. How do you refute that mathematically? Isn't that accurate?
Well, sure, but okay, show me. If you're saying, oh, I'm the candidate who's going to get the non-voters to show up, show me. Get them to show up.
Isn't it bigger than the candidate you would hope at this point if the Democratic voting public recognizes that the differences between Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar and Kamala Harris are very relevant and worthy of discussion right now, but that in the end, the most important thing is going to vote because turnout alone can win this thing since half the country doesn't vote, then don't the specifics become less relevant?
The specifics on the issues?
The specifics of an individual candidate's electability.
Well, I mean, it's always the dream that you're going to change the turnout ratio, the complexion of the turnout in your favor, because there's always a tantalizing vote parked on the sidelines. We never get to 100% turnout. And so if you can tilt that in one direction, if you can juice your turnout more than the other guy can juice his or hers, you're going to win. You know, Obama definitely had some turnout benefit on his side, and Donald Trump then had it 8 years later. So I get the theory of the case, but it's not enough just to say, I'm going to do it, because anybody can say it. Give me the evidence that you can actually do it, and you have test runs. I mean, and look, crowd size isn't enough. You can have a big crowd that doesn't necessarily reflect what Bernie had big crowds in Brooklyn for the New York primary and still lost it by a considerable amount. So crowd sizes can be a deceiving metric. And so I'm not arguing to you that it's easy to show the evidence, or that whatever evidence you can show is going to be open and shut. But you got to do something if you're going to make the case that you have some unique ability to win that others don't.
All right. Bill Scher, contributing editor to Politico Magazine. We're linking to his latest article, which we've been discussing today. Bill, pleasure as always having you on.
Wonderful as well. Take care.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We often talk about the economy of the United States, and we have a lot of different questions that we might ask about the economy, but one common one is, what indicators can we look at to tell us whether the economy is doing well right now? And there's a lot of debate over what the right answer to that question is. And number two, there's a question that is more forward-looking, which is, are there any indicators that can give us a clue about how the economy might do in the future? And in general, I've said before, and the data backs up, that we're generally not very good at predicting where the economy is going to go. We can sort of generally say that at a certain point in the next number of years, there's going to be an economic downturn. And we can say that with some certitude because it tends to always happen. If you look back in history, at a certain point, there's always some kind of downturn. But our ability to predict exactly when it will be is relatively poor. Economists aren't particularly good at it. Everybody's pretty bad at it. Financial advisors aren't particularly good at it. But that doesn't mean there aren't indicators we can look at that can provide at least an early warning sign that certain aspects of the economy are starting to not look quite so positive. And one important indicator, might not be one you've heard of before, is, are people able to afford their car payments? And we have new data which tells us that a record 7 million Americans are 90 days or more behind on their car loan payments, 3 months or more behind. And this is a number that's higher than during the 2008 financial crisis, even adjusted for the population growth that the country has seen in the 10 years since. So a reasonable question would be, okay, fine, David, a record number of people are 3 months behind on car payments, but why does that matter? The reason it matters is that car payments are a priority for most people that have a car loan. And the reason why is pretty obvious. If you have a car, you probably need the car to either get to work, which allows you to earn money to pay for your other expenses, or to get to school, or to drive your kids around. So for many Americans, their car payment is a top priority payment every single month. And losing that car, if it becomes repossessed, means you might not be able to go to work, which means you will eventually not be able to make your rent or mortgage payments. And you can sort of imagine how it has this cascading negative effect. Now, there are lots of problems in the auto loan industry that we can point to. There are more and more of these subprime financing options, which are letting people buy cars that are way more expensive than their budgets really dictate they should be driving. There are record long car loans, 84 months. I've even heard of longer loans than that. These are insanely long loans on assets that depreciate. Cars depreciate very quickly, particularly in their first few years. You probably should be buying a cheaper car before you get a car loan that is 84 months long. Predatory rates where people pay astronomically high interest rates on their car loans. Terrible public transit pushes people to get cars who otherwise might say, you know, I can just take public transit to get to work or to school. So there are all these problems in the car lending industry. But that doesn't change that it's a really bad sign that a record number of Americans are 3 months behind on their car loans. And I don't say this because I'm worried about automobile manufacturers. I don't say this because I'm worried that auto lending companies are going to be affected, or that it's bad for the travel industry if people lose their cars and won't take road trips or whatever. This is bad because think about the context. We just had, quote, tax cuts from Donald Trump and Republicans. We have an exploding deficit. We have cheap gas. We have a low federal funds rate. We have historically low unemployment in terms of the rate. We have the stock market near all-time highs. And yet we still have a record number of people who are unable to make their car payments. And this relates to broader problems in the economy. Cost of living is one. Stagnant wages is another. Healthcare spending by individuals and families is another. Student loan debt, the cost of education. And so when we look at this indicator, we have to realize it's not about, is this going to hurt GM? It's more about, why is it that with so many economic indicators actually looking fine, are we still seeing this degree of late payments on auto loans? And there's a couple other notable things for people kind of interested in the car loan industry. There's this common defense that it's not that problematic for people to default on car loans because the car loans are collateralized. What this means is that when a bank gives you a car loan, you are giving them the car as collateral, meaning if you don't pay the loan or you default on the loan, as it is more often said, the lender can just repossess the car and sell it and they're fine. Cars depreciate rapidly. So the idea that that's not a problem is simply not true. Yes, the car gets repossessed, but the car is worth very little compared to the original purchase price. Number two, lenders are more and more willing to extend loans to people who probably shouldn't be buying cars that are that expensive. Because with GPS tracking technology, lenders are also more secure in knowing that if the person defaults, they can use the GPS tracker to just find the car and get it back. That's also a real problem in the car lending industry that is extending credit once again to people who should be having much smaller loans rather than extending loans over 72, 84, or in some cases, I've even heard of 96-month car loans. This is the double-edged sword sort of technology, but not a good indicator, and it is one that a lot of economists are paying very, very close attention to. Does this mean we can predict exactly when the next downturn is going to be? No, it doesn't, but it's an important indicator to look at. On the bonus show today, we're going to be talking about the conviction of the Mexican drug lord El Chapo, and I was waiting for it last night. I knew someone in Trump's inner circle would do it, and it happened. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Donald Trump's press secretary, suggested that we really need a wall because El Chapo is a bad guy and is from Mexico. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders tweeted about this last night, and I replied, and my reply made it into a bunch of articles written about this. She tweeted that El Chapo's reign of terror is now over and that the threat from violent drug cartels is real, so thus we must secure our border. And I wrote back, LOL, he was arrested in Mexico and our law enforcement brought him into the United States of America. What would a wall have done? The UK Independent ended up featuring my tweet. Newsweek ended up writing about the fact that I responded in this way to Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And as I say in my tweet, he was captured in Mexico by Mexican law enforcement and extradited to the United States. So the idea that a wall would have stopped him is silly. But people are very ignorant about this. So one common response that I got on Twitter was, well, come on, David. It's not about El Chapo personally. He was trafficking drugs to the United States of America, and the wall would have stopped that. Well, no, it wouldn't have, because as we know now, most drugs are coming into the United States, not just over the unprotected border, but through actual ports of entry. It's being smuggled through legal ports of entry. So again, a wall wouldn't have helped there. But then it gets even wackier because El Chapo happens to be known for escaping with tunnels and for trafficking drugs with tunnels that go underneath the border. So once again, a wall wouldn't do anything about that. This is a guy who has used tunnels and boats and planes, and it makes this focus on the wall, which we knew would be coming from someone in Trump's inner circle, even sillier. You've got a guy in El Chapo with nearly an unlimited money supply, connections, loyalists all over the world. The idea that a cartel is going to be upended by a wall is absolutely ridiculous. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is being ridiculed for her comment, but I actually think the most important conversation to have here, Pat, is that you can't have a serious conversation about drug trafficking in the United States without talking about the war on drugs. Making drugs illegal and the entire war on drugs industrial complex is what fuels black markets and the violence that comes with them. And it is precisely predictable that El Chapo is what you would predict would happen if you have a war on drugs, the likes of which the United States has been waging in a failed way for decades at this point.
Yeah, our priorities are entirely in the wrong place. If you want fewer undocumented immigrants, if you want fewer drugs coming across the border, one solution would be to legalize and regulate those drugs. We also have to take a look at visa overstays because that takes up a majority of how people get into this country illegally. The wall is just a small portion of that.
As a side note, American law enforcement can't even keep drugs out of our own jails and prisons. Who in their right mind thinks that a wall will keep them out of the United States? And this is, completely aside from all of the other facts that we know, including that, again, most drugs are coming through legal ports of entry smuggled rather than in any place that a border wall would stop them. But, does anyone believe that given our total failure to keep drugs out of the prison and jail system, that a wall is going to stop multinational cartels that are extraordinarily well-funded? Just doesn't pass the common sense or sniff test one iota. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. We've been talking about the Elizabeth Warren Native American PR fiasco. I talked about it on last Friday's show. spoke about it today a little bit with Bill Scher when thinking about electability for the Democratic primary for 2020. Here's a voicemail about this situation, which takes a little bit of a different point of view. Take a listen.
David, you are misreading this Elizabeth Warren situation. What she needs to do is just come out and say, like, yeah, I claim myself as Native American because I would have gotten special privileges or advantages because due to my Native American status. And, like, after she does that, I mean, like, everyone would understand that, right?
You know, the problem with that is that I don't believe she believed she would get advantages by listing herself as Native American. So with the Texas State Bar, where she listed herself as American Indian, that was something that is just for statistical purposes. It wouldn't convey any benefits whatsoever or privileges. With UPenn and Harvard, everything that we know is that this is how she was listed after decisions had already been made about whether she was going to be able to be at those places. So I think that, as I said last week, this has turned into a PR problem. But I don't have any particular reason to think that Elizabeth Warren, number one, knew that she had so little Native American ancestry, and number two, that she believed that she was going to get benefits conferred to her. Tell me if I'm wrong, Pat, but we've seen no evidence that it would even be reasonable to think that there would be privileges associated with that, because she was listing herself this way for statistical purposes.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not from what we initially knew about this whole controversy. Maybe with the stuff that came out recently about the Bar Association application, you can make a case there. I think that this is just going to stick to her until Election Day if she makes it that far. Yeah, I don't think it's very good for her. It's not good for her electability, and we'll see what the consequences are.
Yeah, I don't think it's going away, unfortunately, even though, I mean, listen, you've got a president who's a serial liar, is involved in rampant criminality in all aspects of his life. Is the problem that you're going to choose him over Elizabeth Warren because she misstated her Native American heritage? It's absolutely laughable. But as far as the voicemail is concerned, I don't think Elizabeth Warren should admit that she was trying to gain an advantage by listing herself as Native American, because I've not seen any evidence that that's actually what she believed and what she was trying to do. On today's bonus show, we will talk in more detail about the guilty verdict against El Chapo from the El Chapo trial. We're also going to talk about a real problem to our biosphere, which is the plummeting insect population. And we will also get an update on Sweden's cashless experiment, which we've talked about before. How is it going? And are there any problems that have surfaced? All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Make sure you get access to the bonus show by either becoming a member at www.joinpacman.com or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. It's a great bonus show for you today, and I would love to have your support and speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.